Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am your host, Data T, and this is my channel, The Good Guys. Guys, today we are going to do something different as promised. On our road to 1,000 subscribers, there is a particular outfit that I would like to talk about called The Trace. They say here they are the only newsroom dedicated to covering gun violence, and I would say let's say they're not doing it honestly. So before we get into today's story, I am going to read it in its entirety, and I'll pull up some of the links. I'll briefly cover those links, but I want to cover the story, and then I'll give you guys my opinion throughout as I'm reading. So, guys, if you wouldn't mind leaving a like, leaving a comment, subscribing. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and you guys can hit me on Twitter, you can hit me on minds.com, and even Truth Social. So let us begin, and the story begins with this title. For 2 decades, he studied the root causes of violence, then he was caught in a shootout. To make sense of the experience, Vulcan Topalli reflected on years of conversations with the people most vulnerable to crime. This is that particular man here, okay? And we're going to start with the article. Standing in front of his classroom at Georgia State University, Vulcan Topalli deployed a new device to illustrate how a simple incident can lead to an act of violence, the scar across his forearm. When I teach the students about third-party victims, now I point to myself, he said. The Saturday in May 2021 brought the usual markers of spring. Warm weather, fresh air, children playing, school was out, social distancing restrictions were being lifted, and Topalli's 2 young children were darting in and out of the new family home in Atlanta. Topalli's wife asked him to go pick up some potting soil from the local Home Depot. In the parking lot, young people wearing colorful bathing suits carried beach towels and inflatables. By the time he was standing in the checkout line, shoppers were debating whether they were hearing fireworks or gunfire. He knew they were gunshots. Young people should be out, but I know it doesn't take much for something to happen. Topalli said he remembered thinking, I'm not sure if this was my criminologist's brain or my parent brain, but I just knew it was a perfect storm. During a pause in the gunfire, Topalli and the other shoppers walked out into the parking lot and saw a dispute between 2 groups of young adults. I think I would have stayed in the store. He heard a bullet whiz past his ear. Then one hit his forearm, shattering his ulna bone. He had 911 on the line but dropped his cell phone, struggled to pick it up and get back into the store where he crouched in the vestibule. The gunfire ended, but the echo of 911 operator persistently requested the exact address of the Home Depot was ringing in his ear. First responders arrived within 10 minutes. An Atlanta police officer on the scene started to ask him questions, but abruptly stopped in recognition. Dr. T, is that you? It was one of his former students. Now, this is cut off for some reason, guys. It says here, when someone is shot, all we think about is the kid who had the weapon, I believe. We never think about all the things that led up to that kid having the gun. Now, guys, I'll tell you, yeah, I'm not going to think about that, because guess what? If I have just gotten shot, if my family members have gotten shot, my friends, people that I know, acquaintances, I'm not going to think about the other guy who shot him. Okay, I'm thinking about how can we save this person's life even afterwards. Yes, I want to know what happens, and then I want to know how this man is going to be punished. Okay, I'm not thinking about his past. Everybody comes from a hard life. Everyone does. Some people have it crispy, cake eater, cream, life of luxury, but most Do not. There are going to be struggles you go through. It does not mean you get to use your firearm, rob, pillage, and cause mayhem. So, this quote is, in my opinion, a bunch of bullshit. Okay, so let's continue. Topalli moved to Atlanta in 2000 after completing a National Science Foundation fellowship studying the urban violence in St. Louis. Growing up in Boston, he watched on television as violent American scenes played out during the Civil Rights Movement. He was further motivated to study criminology because of his increasing violent crime in the 1980s and 90s, particularly in black and brown communities. Most politicians and community leaders thought the solution was increasing policing. And as legislations like the 1994 crime bill passed, mass incarceration rose dramatically. Who passed the 1994 crime bill? Let's first acknowledge that. But what is the 1994 crime bill? If we click this here, let's see. Okay. 3 ways the 1994 crime bill continues to hurt communities of color, so that's still in effect. The first one, in the subtitle, authorized death penalty for 60 new federal offenses. I believe in the death penalty. Some of these animals should be erased from the face of the earth. 74% of defendants recommended for the death penalty by federal prosecutors who were people of color. Guys, majority of violent crimes are committed by African Americans. That is a fact. Okay. 2. Imposed mandatory life sentences for individuals with 3 or more felony convictions. Okay. And it says here 78.5% of those percentage of Americans serving life sentence in 2016 who were people of color. Yes, I believe that's probably true. It says here 3. Levied harsh new penalties for justice-involved youth. 2 to 3 share of youth sentenced to life in prison in America who are black. Well, they are the ones committing majority of the crimes. I think the only thing that I don't like from the crime bill, guys, was those were some of those mandatory minimums for crack cocaine versus other drugs that were meth, and crack was heavily in African American communities, and it did, in somewhat way, it did target them. It definitely was unfair in the rulings, so that I can definitely get behind. But we need to understand some of the facts also, that majority of violent criminals are black. Period. Okay, so let's look at also who was the one who, let's say, sponsored it, or who's responsible for the crime bill. This is according to the Brookings EDU, or I believe the Institute. It says here, since the beginning of the presidential race, however, former Vice President Joe Biden has been asked repeatedly about his role in creating this bill. Okay, they are talking about the crime bill here. Okay, where else? Okay, this is in the Brennan Center. Overall, though, the law is now seen by many as a major driver of mass incarceration. For that reason, policymakers who played a role in pushing it forward, including presidential candidates Senator Bernie Sanders and former Vice President Joe Biden, have been attacked for supporting it. Okay, and then here it says, in the second part of the series, former Vice President Joe Biden record on race, NPR Steve's Inkeep examines the long-term consequences of Biden's sponsorship of the 1994 crime bill. Okay, so we can thank Mr. Joe Biden for that. All right. If you want to peg him as a racist, according to what these guys are saying, because it primarily affects what did they say? 3 ways the 1994 crime bill continues to hurt communities of color. Blame Joe Biden. All right. So let's move on. It says here, meanwhile, public health researchers were silenced by the 1995 Dickey Amendment, which made it extremely difficult to research gun violence as a public health issue. Guys, I will say, let's see what this says here a little bit. Okay. Why can't the U.S. treat gun violence as a public health problem? Well, it's not a public health problem, for one. Okay, this is a crime issue, and you can research gun problems all you want or gun statistics, which the CDC did, okay, when they had their statistic, when they researched almost every year 2 to 3 million people use guns in self-defense every year. But the anti-gun guys decided, hey, we need to get rid of that. So the CDC took that down from their website. Okay, and I'm sorry, but that is the truth. All right. So the 1995 Dickey Amendment, you can't put it as a public health issue. I'm sorry, you can't. But you can definitely research it in terms of gun violence and crime. Why not? All right. I don't see why the government can't do that. Now let's move on. The most sustainable thing we have and have invested in is the police. We have very inefficient formula for dealing with violence in the United States, and we have been doing it for a long time. He said recently, it's time for us to do something different. Guys, I don't believe that. The police have been very effective in dealing with crime. Who else are you going to call? Who else are you going to call? You can't call anybody else. Okay? The police have been very effective in dealing with crime. Okay? You point them where they need to go, they can get there. All right? Yes, they are a reactionary force, and sometimes they do preventative work. Okay? But I'm sorry, they've been very effective. Topalli's purpose was elevated by what he calls a clear distinction being made in criminology research at the time between the study of criminal behavior and efforts to prevent almerated. Okay, I don't know what that is. I realized, or almorated. Okay, prevented or almorated, get rid of. Some kind of synonym there. I realized I had been studying urban violence and poverty for 25 years. Maybe it's time for me to start applying some of those lessons towards prevention, said Topalli. Since Topalli entered the field 30 years ago, more public funding has funneled into gun violence research. The field has expanded, and Topalli has noticed that his students, always fairly diverse, now see themselves as activists. Many of them have either witnessed the effects of violence firsthand or motivated to study it because of structural inequalities like mass incarceration. Okay, so let's hear what it says here. Funneled. So people are funding the gun violence research. Okay, now the government is funding gun violence research, but it's years behind. Hey, they started doing this, I guess this is in 2022. Fine. I don't have a problem with the government researching so long as it's done honestly. Okay? They talked about the CDC, all these things here, more money. Okay, no problem. I don't have a problem with that. Okay? It says here, as we move on, all right? They're taking more of an advocacy approach, working alongside other fields to find solutions that build up communities. His research, okay, has throughout the years combined data analysis and ethnography methods to understand not only how often community violence occurs, but the attitudes of those perpetuated and who's most vulnerable. Okay, so if we go to the research here, what research is he doing? Okay, so he's got a online library in Wiley. Okay, so it looks like this is on an online library, and he puts it in here. Okay, I've seen those before in libraries. Okay, it says here, his research, the attitudes of those who perpetuate and those who are most vulnerable. So let's go to that. And here is a book or an article that he has written, Might Not Be a Tomorrow, a multi-method approach to early death and youth crime. Okay, I would be interested to read this and to see what some of his methods are. Okay, I think I have a bunch of my own, but let's keep moving. The warm day in the Home Depot parking lot, Topalli's life collided with his decades of study, and the experience only reinforced his focus on the cause of gun violence in urban communities. Poverty, under-resourced families, racism, and lack of financial opportunities. Now, the racism is the least of their worries. Okay, poverty, under-resourced families, Lack of financial opportunities, I will get behind that. The sources of retaliatory violence are even clearer, entangled with human emotions that are informed by trauma, like witnessing violence or living with grief. Retaliatory, this is talking about gangs and drug activity. That's what I see. You shot my boy, I'm coming to shoot yours. Stuff like that. I had written papers 10 to 15 years ago that talked about these events taking place, and I finally got to see myself in some of these papers I had written. As Topalli sat in the ambulance across from a teenager who was also shot, he knew his wounds weren't fatal. He was able to remain calm and make small talk with the young man. As the ambulance maneuvered, it was its way in and out of traffic en route to Grady Memorial Hospital. Topalli knew he was there for reasons that had begun far before that Saturday shooting. When someone is shot, all we think about is the kid who fired the weapon, and we never think about all the things that led up to that kid having the gun, how they were born, the way they lived, and how they were looked at by other people, Topalli said. But I think it's critical that we trace back history for the answer. Guys, this can be done after the fact, and I think that was that quote that was way up here. But to be honest, I'll say it again. I am not worried about this at all. This is after the fact. And even this would be preventative measures. The research here, yes, this can be all in that. But at the time of the shooting, guys, I'm not worried about that asshole at all. Okay? A month after the Home Depot shooting, 3 suspects were arrested, and it became clear that an argument at a pool party had spilled into the parking garage and its adjacent parking lot. The 3 teenagers, all between the ages of 17 and 19 at the time, reminded Topalli of the hundreds of people who he'd interviewed throughout his career, young black boys and men with conflicting attitudes about community and identity. So this says a lot here. These 3 teenagers who are black, 17 and 19, okay, and because of their small view of masculinity and how everything has to be 0 to 100, they were shooting in the parking lot. They grazed somebody else, okay, who wasn't, who is a third party, which is this man, Mr. Topalli, and he feels now the need to do something about it, right? I've interviewed individuals who are at risk for committing violence all the time, and if you ask them about their plans for next year or week, they don't have any plans, said Topalli. The reason they don't have any plans is that they expect an early death. Following the shooting, he struggled with the shallow news media coverage of renowned Professor White and male being caught in the crosshairs of a shootout. If this could happen to him, the narrative seemed to just, it could happen to anyone. Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is why a lot of people, when you stay in a particular neighborhood, they don't want others from another neighborhood to come in, especially inner cities. Okay, suburbs don't want the inner city people moving in, okay, because they bring a host of problems, and the gun violence is one of them. Drugs, the single motherness, the rampant. It's just, it's insane, and nobody wants to be a part of that. Okay, it says here, but Topalli had spent years collecting and examining data on who was most likely to be a victim of gun violence, and he knew it was anyone. It wasn't anyone. Black Americans are 10 times more likely to die by gun violence. Let's look that up and see what he says here. Gun violence disproportionately and overwhelmingly hurts communities of color. Okay, we know this. Gun homicides are on the rise in the United States. Women of color are more likely than their white counterparts to be shot and killed with firearms. Non-fatal gun violence has lasting impact on individuals and communities. Solutions. In addition to stronger common guns, this is the bullshit. Okay, in addition to stronger common sense gun laws, guys, strengthening gun laws is not going to make a dent in this problem. Okay, it will not work. I can't. Why is it every time the solution is to strengthen the gun laws? California, Chicago, they have the strongest gun laws in the country, and still they have the worst violence. This is bullshit. It says here policymakers must address systematic racial inequalities. Bullshit. There's nothing racial going on. Okay, I mean, in a small case, but institutionally, no, we don't have that. Okay, let's move on. Here's another link here. It says homicide is also the leading cause of death for black males under the age of 44, which is true. In Atlanta, black residents make up 85% of homicide, but only 50% of the city's total population. Okay, so if we look at leading cause of death for black Americans, okay, so we got a chart here that we would have to go through, and I'm not going to do that right now. This is for the CDC. Okay, these people, they keep saying they don't want to study gun violence. I don't see that here. This talks about a whole bunch of other diseases. Homicide here, 1 to 19. Okay. So yeah, this is what we're talking about right here, guys. Black. Okay. Hey, we understand. Okay. But when you're out there thugging, I guess that's what usually will happen to you. Okay. There's a whole tale about living by the sword, you die by the sword. So you're going to be a criminal. You will meet it either by another criminal or by somebody who's a self-defender, right? And that's what we are seeing. That's what this channel covers. So as we move on, it says here black residents make up 85% of homicides. Let's look at this. This is from Atlanta. This might okay, this is a PDF. Okay, this is something that we may have to read. Okay, not all of us, but it talks about Atlanta specifically. I wonder how many years does it cover. Well, from 2010. Okay, well, more reading to do, right? Now it says here, Topalli described the fear propelled by such news coverage as irrational, fodder for movements like the Buckhead Cityhood movement or Cop City, instead of initiatives that could more adequately address instances of violence. Cop City is a proposed public safety training center for law enforcement that would cost more than $90 million to be built on an 85-acre campus, while Buckhead is an affluent, predominantly white neighborhood that wants to secede from the city, and I wonder why. Okay, if we look up Cop City, I guess this is an initiative. End People Stop Cop City Music Festival. I don't know what this. Here's what you need to know about Cop City. Okay, so this is more reading that we need to do. Okay, but it looks like they're trying to build a training facility for police officers, and I don't see a problem with that. Okay, maybe they should build one for civilians. Anyway, secede from the city. Let's see what that says. Okay, Politico, the white Atlanta enclave that wants to secede. You know what? I don't blame them, and I'll give you an example. Check this out. Do you know that whenever, and I want you to take this example seriously. Do you know that whenever black Americans in Hollywood, in music, in entertainment, okay, they make their money differently, okay, in sports, do you realize that none of them ever go live back in the hood? They separate themselves. They leave and go to an affluent area where white people are at, and they love it. Because guess what? There's no crime there. Okay? It has to be said, guys. Okay? And this is why, and I'm going to tell you, this is probably not a nice thing to say, but sometimes I will tell you, myself and other people that I know include, we don't like living around a lot of black people. Unless we know their temperament, we don't like living around them. Why? Because of this nonsense that we get. Okay, the rampant crime, okay, the gun violence, okay, all of these things, okay, that this professor is talking about, we do not want to deal with it. So I got no problem if they say they want to secede from the city. Uh, Kudos to them. I think it's a smart decision. Anyway, let's move on. It says here, I was having a conversation with someone and I heard them say that Buckhead was becoming a war zone. And it was laughable, he said. There is a large misunderstanding of what causes violence. And that is an issue because if we don't have a realistic understanding of the violence problem, then creating good solutions is never going to follow. We do have a good understanding, okay? It was talked about earlier here, okay? Poverty, lack of resources. Even though we got the internet, I think a lot of people can become, um, very well off from learning online. But yeah, I don't see. Well, they did cover it here. The causes of violence. Okay, let's move on. It is his work as a criminologist that informs Topalli's empathy, but also fuels his frustration at a system that perpetuates the violence that it also condemns. Throughout his career, he has struggled with little funding is distributed toward public service and the critiques of the efficacy of these public services like violence interruption. Okay, wait a minute. Didn't he talk about how he has more public funding has been funneled into gun violent research? Okay, so I don't know what he means here. Maybe during his time, and then now he's talking about there's more, but this sounds like he is talking about what is this now? He says throughout his career. So maybe he's talking about the 30 years he's talking about. Okay, we can give that to him. Okay, but now that is not the case. Okay, and we know that from this article. Which one was it? Where the government now is looking into the government here, and we know that from this article here that the government is funding gun violence research. Okay, years behind, but hey, when is the government not behind? All right, anyway, so let's move on. Okay, so let's move along. It says here, but his shooting created an opportunity. During his surgery preparation, he and Dr. Mara Schneckner decided to write an op-ed for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that called for a comprehensive public health approach to addressing gun violence, one that includes public health officials, sociologists, medical professionals, social workers, and law enforcement. In the piece, they also criticized city leaders for their reliance on law enforcement to address crime. Following the shooting, Topalli began participating in data collection and analysis of hospital-based violence interruption program. Okay, the Interrupting Violence in Youth and Young Adults, a multidisciplinary effort to combat the underlying causes of gun violence. The program, developed by trauma surgeon Dr. Randy Smith, is structured to end the cycle of violence by addressing the root causes that lead to it. Smith said, and engaging violence interrupters to meet with patients and their families in the hospitals and continue to do so after they no longer need medical attention. Guys, I skipped the op-ed. Let's go to this. Okay, let's see what it says here. It says opinion, public health knowledge important in fight to reduce crime. Okay, this is the opinion. I would like to read this and see what they mean, what their opinion is. I'm sure their opinion is probably might be different from my own, but maybe not. Okay, so let's go back here, and we were here. It says here, Topalli has asked to speak to the young man involved in his shooting. whom he refers to as really just young kids. No, I would refer to them as young heathens, little jokers, these gang banging thugs, and animals in some cases, okay? Along with their families, in the hope that he can hear their perspectives and understand their stories beyond their arrest record. As a researcher, he understood the causes of violence and how the availability of guns accelerates many of them. That is bullshit. You read, if you go, to be honest, do I really need to read the rest of this? Because this part right here, the availability of guns accelerates many of them. Guys, if you go a little bit further, you'll get to the agenda. And the availability of guns means nothing. It means nothing, guys, okay? People kill people, all right? We have to understand that. There's only a little bit, so let's read the rest of that. It says here, speaking of the teens indicted in this school, he said, I get why they ended up where they are. They are a very good example of the failure of society to address these issues when these individuals are younger. Guys, can we lay this at society? In some cases, yes, but can we also lay the blame at the feet of culture? Look at the aspects of African American culture, of black culture, okay? We had, if we're going to talk about Atlanta, let's talk about the district attorney who is prosecuting these people for talking about killings in their rap songs, right? If we go to Google and we find prosecutor goes after rappers, let's do that one. How about that? And I spelled prosecutor wrong. Okay, sorry about that. That's my virus thing. Atlanta area prosecutor cites rap lyrics as evidence. Who is this woman? What's her name? So she's gone after the district attorney, Fannie Willis, is an unbiased in using rap lyrics to help prosecute her cases. This woman, okay, is going after these rappers. So this is the music that a lot of black people listen to, okay? And I'm telling you, it does have an influence, okay? So if we were to look up this lady, okay? Let's see who she is, all right? Fannie Willis, okay? Let's see if we can get an image. This is this lady here, okay? You see her? Okay? Well, some of the things that she was saying, she was a tough lady, okay? And look at this one. I like this one right here. It says here, the Fannie T. Willis, District Attorney, okay? Over here it says, Madam, okay? Madam District Attorney Fannie Willis. Okay, I like that. Okay, but this lady is going after them. Okay, and if we want to talk about things that are evident, that are the cause, and we're talking about society, we need to also talk about the culture of black people, the single motherhoodness, okay? The culture where it's a whole lot. I don't even know. Yeah, let me tell you this. Sometimes we will look at sometimes black culture and people, they want to dress a certain way. They want to be fly, right? They want to be cool. And all the time you will see, if you ever step into these ghettos, they live in the poorest conditions, but they got the freshest gear. Tell me I'm lying. Why is it you are getting food stamps, but you got on fresh Jordans? Why? Tell me. I'm trying to understand. Okay, so please, I don't want to hear it. Society, no. I will blame it on black culture. Okay, this is why some people will say, hey, sometimes black culture is trash, and sometimes I gotta tell you, I have to agree, because some of those things that they have that are the pillars in their culture, okay, that they are so cool about, they want to keep, I'm not about it. Okay, anyway, let's move on. Okay, last thing it says here, speaking of the teens and died in the shooting, he said, I get why they ended up here. They were a good example of a fairer society to address these issues when these individuals are younger. Okay, we just covered that, and that's bullshit. When Topalli looks down at his surgical scar, he is reminded of early in his career when he described violence as a disease and retaliation as the mechanism of its spread. Okay. In response, he said many citizen, policymakers, and law enforcement officers said, let them kill each other off. And guys, sometimes even myself, I had that attitude, okay, where I said, let the animals kill each other. Do you guys remember from Training Day when Alonzo said, hey, let the animals kill each other, fuck them, okay? I somewhat agree with that, but then it actually spills out into the world, okay? And that's when we cannot have that policy, okay? And he's a prime example of it. He is a prime example. This white guy, Topalli, okay, got shot accidentally, okay? And I think it even says it in here. It says here, so the resources wouldn't be wasted, but researchers know that violence doesn't happen in silos, which means it doesn't happen in these pockets where they're isolated. They're not. It says outside of the devaluation of human life. The problem with that idea is that that there's always leakage in the system. He said, and now I am part of that leak. Okay, so he was a third party. He was affected by this, and it's true, okay, that we cannot have that policy, because then what happens when it ventures out of its city? Think about this, the city of Baltimore, okay, and actually the whole state of Maryland is a bad idea, because that is a terrible state. Let's look at Washington D.C. and Virginia. Okay, if you look at Washington D.C., you got one particular area southeast where there is majority of shootings, whatever you want to call it. Okay, and there was a number of neighboring counties in Virginia. They didn't want the metro to go to certain places. Why? Because they did not want DC residents leaking out into Virginia, especially the more violent ones. They want them to stay there. Okay, so guess what? We already have some of the Virginia district attorneys come out, and they said, hey, look, your DC residents aren't being prosecuted. Okay, they're having multiple felonies, multiple rap sheets, and then they come to Virginia and they commit crimes when they should have been in jail. And this is the reason, okay? This is why you get the reason where you got Buckhead wants to secede from the city. This is the reason why, okay? We have people who say, you know what? Let them kill each other. Let them fight each other off, okay? And I understand the sentiment, but things like that are not going to work. What is going to work, guys? I'm going to tell you. All right? And I'll end with this. What's going to work, in my opinion, is more guns. Okay? More guns meaning you have to introduce them to the grassroots. The grassroots are the people. In the end, it is the people that will protect themselves. You have to be able to trust the people with guns, with more firearms in their possession, to be better able to protect themselves. The police cannot do this, okay? You can't have, I don't know what, 40, 60,000 police officers in New York, and then expect them to police a population of over what, 10 million people, it's not going to work. So the citizen is going to be, and it's going to have to be responsible. We should encourage gun ownership. And if you say, "Oh no, more guns doesn't make things go down," well, I'm sorry. I just gave you an example. This was in a different video of what happened in Brazil, where Bolsonaro decided to give more guns to the people, and the homicide rate dropped almost 15 to 18%. You can look that up. That is a true fact. So things like that, okay? More gun ownership. Encourage gun ownership, okay? And then at the same time, we don't mandate, because that's what Democrats do, but we encourage. We ask people to get trained. We ask people to buy guns, get more guns, get trained with guns. And then guess what? What else happens after that? Okay? Then we tell we get somebody like what was her name? Madam Terry L. What's her name? Oh man, I can't believe I forgot. Madam Fannie Willis. We get somebody like this woman here, okay, in district attorneys in all of these states, and we tell them, "Ma'am, sir, you need to start enforcing the law." And you come down hard on these criminals. And I tell you what, not only do you come down on them hard, you punish them, you publicly humiliate them, and then you guess what you do after that? If it's a heinous crime, you put them away for a very long time, and then at the same time, you put them on the death penalty. Okay? I'm sorry. You have to do these things, and if you don't, you just get more crime. All right. Not bad for this probably went way long, okay, but this guy here, Vulcan Topalli, I would like to sit down with him and talk, but you know, he may not. If I'm not a particular educational standard, maybe that won't happen. I don't want to disparage him, but he's seen it. He's seen it up close, and he's been talking about guns for 2 decades, and well, now he's a part of the statistic. Now he is trying to find a solution, and if what he has laid out here in this article is part of the solution, I don't think he's going to reach any amount of success, in my opinion. Guys, if you guys liked this, please let me know. I can do more of these. I will do more of these. They'll probably be more likely once a week, okay? But these people, we have to keep an eye on them, the Trace, because they keep putting out some things that I think are nonsensical. And so with that, guys, I will tell you, only good men will step in to do something to prevent evil, to step in the way of evil. And I think this guy might be a good guy, okay? He wants to highlight it, but maybe we just go about different ways of doing it, okay? But good men will step in, and if good men do nothing, there will be no good guys.